What's going on, everyone? Thank you for coming in, checking out a new installment of Coast to Coast Sports. I am your host, Matty Ice Raridan, and I am back home for you. Those of you who do not know, I'm off the market. I'm married now. I married my beautiful wife, Elena, on October 13th, and have been gone on the honeymoon for the last couple weeks. So filling in for me was Texas Ed, and I'm just going to go ahead and introduce him really quick. Ladies and gentlemen, Texas Ed, who filled in for me, who did a wonderful job. I am announcing that he is another member of our show. So, Texas Ed, let the fans know what they can expect from you.
Hey guys, I am so proud to be a part of this show moving forward. And what you're going to get from me is Texas, Texas sports, whether it be just Texas Longhorns or all around the state. I'm going to do my best to cover as much as I can for y'all so you can come to us for all your needs in each one of our states.
Perfect, Texas Ed. I really appreciate that. I mean, well, if you haven't heard the name of our show, it is Coast to Coast Sports. So having Texas right there is a big staple, in my opinion, when it comes to the country. And also, we have here Smoking Gator himself. That is David Street over there.
What up, everybody? And yes, you heard that correctly. Our boy here got married on what was it, October 13th. That was Friday the 13th, by the way. So just make of that what you will. That's all I'm going to say about that.
There was no bad luck that day. The only unfortunate side was the next day when Oregon did lose to Washington, which I'm sure you guys covered in my absence. But hey, it's okay. We're making our way back. But as far as Friday the 13th goes, we embraced it. We had fun. We actually had some Jason masks all throughout the wedding hall. So we had fun with it. It was a blessing how well the day went. But yes, so I am back, and I really appreciate the work and consistency my two hosts did put in my absence. So I appreciate you two. But yes, here we are, another weekend done with college football, and just as every weekend, it's always producing, and that's what I love about college football. It doesn't matter who you're watching, big or small, it will always produce. So that being said, I want to go ahead and start and talk about our games over the weekend. Three pivotal games at this point, and with the time of the season and where it's at, it doesn't matter who we're playing; it is always going to be a pivotal game. I'm actually going to go ahead and start with Texas Ed. Can you kind of go over what happened with Texas this weekend and how they do without their starting quarterback?
I appreciate the lead in. Texas did play BYU this past weekend, and we did beat them 35-6, and it really wasn't that close. It was really with us having a first-time starting quarterback with the injury to our main starting quarterback, Quinn Ewers. Malik Murphy, the redshirt freshman, did take the reins of the offense, and he performed admirably. He performed like a freshman making his first start against live competition, and the rest of the team built up around him. With our running back room, with our wide receiver room, they're better than anybody else's rooms that they're going to have the rest of their schedule. And, going up into what we think will be Oklahoma, loss against Kansas permitted. Those players on the outside will really help grow Malik Murphy and allow him to be a freshman, but still get better and better and better. This is one of the best quarterback rooms that Texas has had in a very long time. I'm thinking back to the days of Major Applewhite and Chris Sims. Here we have Quinn Ewers, Malik Murphy, and Arch Manning. Now, Malik did play the entire game, and the prevailing thought is that it's to save Arch Manning's red shirt, which is, definitely going to be something that we're looking at having going into the SEC next year. But as far as the game is concerned, the two best friends for a quarterback showed up in a big way this game against BYU. The defense this looked like an SEC style defense against a non-conference opponent. They overwhelmed BYU from start to finish. In fact, there were only 3 plays that I saw of 18 yards or more throughout the entire game. That is phenomenal. That is suffocating. Now, BYU did put together a couple of drives to get down into the red zone. No touchdowns given up. A couple of quirky things with Sataki and his clock management, led to one of the field goals versus trying to get in the end zone. But overall, giving up only 6 points. The defense had 3 turnovers. They gave up 2 out of 13 for third down and had 3 red zone stops. That is winning football on the defensive side of the ball. And then you had the running game. That's the second best friend for a quarterback. Jonathan Brooks continued his outstanding year by running for another 98 yards. And he didn't play most of the fourth quarter. So overall, Texas ran for 208 yards on the ground. On top of a defense like that, there's not going to be a whole lot of room for a team to come up against us. There was great balance in our scoring. 2 runs for a touchdown. We had 2 passes for a touchdown. One on a hold up kind of deep ball to Edni Mitchell, and another one on his slant. Those were both 2 really good balls by Malik Murphy, but there were some not so great moments that he threw flat-footed. He threw off of his back foot. Those are things that can get cleaned up. But remember, this is his first start. This is a starting point, and he wins in that kind of fashion against a pretty decent team coming into Austin. So we're just expecting better things as we go along, and it's really going to have to show up this upcoming week against Kansas State.
Yeah, I was impressed watching Malik Murphy out there. Actually, BYU is not a walk in the park. They always can put up a fight. They've got a lot of Samoans down there in the trenches. If you watch any of the BYU games, they got some big boys there, and it's not easy. So for Malik Murphy to come in there and play the way he did, and I think it was also a blessing that they were playing in Austin. It just kind of helped him a little bit more, but it gave him that confidence. But you guys are going to laugh, and if my wife hears this, or if my good friend Hannah Hafer hears this, she's going to kill me. But I'm going to throw out some numbers here. That's 9, 10, 38, 39, 54, and 55. And you're probably wondering what those are. But those are the channels of all the sports stations they had in Cancun. I memorized them. I was on top of it. And point, this game was actually the only college game they had on at the time. And I'm like, well, I mean, we were kind of sitting around at that moment. So, of course, I'm going to tune in and watch the game. So, being able to watch Malik Murphy, like I said, I was really impressed on what he was able to do in his first start. And I'm interested to see the rest of the season. I mean, Oklahoma did lose to Kansas. I mean, they did get upset, but for your sake, I hope that Oklahoma does win out the rest, and so do you guys, because I really want to see this matchup again.
I certainly want to see it too. One point on Malik I wanted to put a bow on him is he reminded me a lot of Jalen Hurts when he first came in 2016. The rest of the team around him was built up. It was raring to go. It is just a great, sports car that you just need a driver, and all he has to do is not wreck the car. Just get through it. Use those safe throws to get the offense humming, and then grow within the role. That's all we need him to do right now as we get through the rest of this Big 12 schedule. Now, what you were saying about Oklahoma, yes, the loss that Oklahoma took over the weekend, it can get a little wonky when we start seeing these college football playoff rankings come out this week, and we're looking forward to seeing where we rank, where they rank, and how it's going to meet up, hopefully in the Big 12 championship game.
Yeah, with Oregon, we're in a very similar boat as Texas. We have one loss, and it is against who is projected to be one in the conference game, and that's Washington for us, just as with Texas, it's Oklahoma. So, of course, we're always looking at that. We want to see them. They do better. It kind of helps us out a little bit more, but we have to continue to win. And over the weekend, Oregon in pretty big statement win. They won 35-6 against Utah, same score as Texas. But uh, anywhere you see the word statement. It was a big statement win for the Ducks, and of course, I'm going to agree to that. But it's more so to me of the 35 points we put up against them because Utah's defense is legit. If you look at their stats over this year, even over the last couple years, Utah's defense is scary good. And I was impressed that we were able to put up those numbers. And I was also impressed with our defense to hold them to 6. They are playing with backup quarterbacks. And so I will give Utah that. But Utah still always puts up a fight. I mean, it doesn't matter who they're playing, they always put up a fight. And I was worried going into the game because we were playing in Utah. This was a road game for us, and they've won, if I'm correct, 16 straight home games. So it's not a walk in the park there in Utah. And being able to go in there and not even allow a single touchdown to the home team, I feel like was very, very big on our end because we did go into the game dealing with some injuries with our defensive backs, especially with Kyrie Jackson, who is our number one cornerback there. So I was worried to see how this was going to play out, but 35-6, I'll take it. I mean, Whittingham, say it time and time again. I like that dude as a coach. I think what he has done with Utah is tremendous, and I think that he deserves to win a championship here soon because of all that he's doing, especially with the Utes. But unfortunately, this year, without Cam Rising, it was kind of almost destined that they were going to, pick up a loss or 2 losses along the way, and their season is most likely over now. But they'll still always put up a fight. So they're a bunch of dogs out there. But I was impressed with Bo Nix. I have been impressed with Bo Nix. He's not putting up big numbers, but he's playing smart football. Smart football. The team itself only has 2 turnovers all year. So that speaks not only to him, but also speaks to the running backs, the receivers holding on to that ball. Turnovers is detrimental in this game, especially when you're playing against your own conference. So I'm impressed with how the Ducks are playing on both sides of the ball, but offensively, I see something in this team that it I expect us to go pretty far this year. We do have that one loss, but I hope that we do meet Washington again in the Pac-12 Conference Championship and we avenge that loss. I do think that we are the better team, especially the last 2 weeks, seeing how Washington's playing. But I've just been impressed, and I'm really loving what Dan Lanning is doing with this team. If you did not hear, folks, we did pick up a huge recruit commitment today, and that is Elijah Rushing. He decommitted from Arizona. He's a 5-star defensive lineman, and well, he saw what it seems like a lot of other people are seeing in Oregon, and he decided to commit to us. So I think Oregon's doing a lot of great, not only on the field, but off the field. So I'm totally stoked with what's happening, and it's 1 week at a time. So that victory, I'm impressed with. But fortunately, someone who may not be impressed fully with their game this past week, and there's still probably some things he's able to point out that he was impressed with. But David, why don't you let the folks know what happened with Florida this weekend against the Bulldogs?
Yes. Well, first of all, let me just say, Florida, you had to give us fans false hope. You just had to score on your opening drive, and you just had to hold Georgia to a field goal on its opening drive and make us think that we actually had a chance. You just had to give us false hope. That cuts deep, man. That cuts real deep. But yeah, man, at the end of the day, we were huge underdogs for a reason. And even without Bowers, and I think a lot of people me included, by the way. I'll own up to that. I think we all just assumed that not necessarily that we were going to win the game, but that it was going to be easier for us because Bowers is such a pivotal part of the offense. But we also have to remember that this is still Georgia at the end of the day, and as far as talent goes, nobody is better than Georgia right now. Like they're the kind of team where they can lose their best player and they can still be humming along. So I think that's something a lot of people, including me, had underestimated. But just watching the game, I think one thing that just stood out to me was the fact that Georgia out talented us at the end of the day because um, Georgia looked like a normal football team out there, guys, and I don't mean that as a knock against them at all. In fact, I would say that it's probably the opposite. Like when I'm watching them, it wasn't like they had anything explosive going on, or it wasn't like they were the Harlem Globetrotters on a football field. They looked like a normal team out there. The problem is that they were the more talented team than us, and they're elite on when it comes to both lines, both offensive line and defensive line. Because I think we all know that you're not going to win championships without an elite defensive line or an elite offensive line. I mentioned before that we had a great opening drive, but then Georgia adjusted well. And honestly, aside from Coach Nick Saban from Alabama, I don't think anybody is better at making adjustments than Kirby Smart is because being down 26-7 at halftime, you have that false hope, but you just knew we're down 19 to a Kirby Smart team. There is no way in hell that we're going to come back against them because we simply don't have the players to do that. And also our offensive line was terrible. I mean, our offensive line has been trash like pretty much all season, man. But it was terrible against Georgia, and especially one dude that I got to call out is Damian George. Listen, I don't know Damian as a person. I'm sure he's a wonderful person. So just know that obviously, I'm not talking trash about him as a person, but as a player, he has not impressed me one bit this year at all. And in fact, there was one particular play on Saturday where I can't even say he gave up because to give up implies that you at least tried. That's the thing. This dude didn't even try. He completely missed his man. He completely messed up on his assignment, and Graham Mertz got sacked purely because of Damian George. Like I was fuming at that moment. Like, bro, what the hell are you doing here? Like, oh my god. And by the way, I don't know if you guys saw, but Kirby Smart took a shot at Dan Mullen when he said, he didn't like to recruit, and that was very satisfying to hear. I have my own personal opinions about Kirby. I'll just leave it at that. But he wasn't wrong. Mullen clearly did not like to recruit. And then just one final point I'll add to this, guys, is I don't think Georgia beating us, like having our number, I don't think it's more so because of the talent. I mean, obviously they are more talented than us, and that is definitely a big reason why why they've been beating us so badly. But I think, but also consider this: Georgia is also obviously more talented than South Carolina and Vanderbilt. Both those teams gave Georgia a harder time than we did. And both those teams lost to us. We killed Vanderbilt and we beat South Carolina in a shootout. What it comes down to is this. If you know anything about Kirby, then you should know that Kirby absolutely despises us with the fire of 1,000 suns. He absolutely hates us so much. And aside from winning national championships, nothing makes that man happier than beating Florida. And it's just, I feel like that's an edge that he's always going to have over Napier, and I don't mean that as a dig against Napier. I think it's very well known that I like Napier a lot. I like what he's doing. I don't like everything about Napier, but for the most part, I like what he's doing. But guys, Kirby Smart grew up in the state of Georgia. He played for the Bulldogs. He has UGA in his blood. Like UGA has always been a part of his life, and it's always going to be a part of his life. Whereas with Napier, on the other hand, he did not grow up in Florida. He either grew up in, I think he was born in Tennessee and then grew up in Georgia. I don't remember, but I know he did not grow up in Florida. And as far as I'm concerned, he did not grow up a Gator fan. So like he doesn't have that sort of edge. Now, am I saying that Napier doesn't or can't understand the rivalry here? No, I'm not saying that at all. And in fact, I think you could say that he does understand the rivalry with how well that he's been recruiting, because he understands that the SEC is, you know, recruiter die. So I think he understands that. But there's just something about having a school always being a part of your life. And guys, like when it comes to Kirby Smart, when you have an elite coach combined with elite players, combined with the fact that you're coaching at your alma mater, that's a dangerous combination right there. Like I hate Georgia so much, but just that, like they've got an incredible thing going on, and I hope Georgia fans, for their sake, I hope they embrace this as much as they can, because they are truly living in glory times right now, and it's not going to last forever. So I hope they, for their sake, I hope they embrace it as much as they can, because it's going to end eventually.
Yeah, I'm gonna pick up where you were talking about Kirby being an elite coach, and I think that is not a surprise to anyone. If you've been watching college football the last several years, Kirby is taking over kind of that Nick Saban role. But what uh, other thing that he is elite at is he is a elite recruiter. He is continually bringing in these recruiting classes after recruiting classes that are dominating the country. And one thing that I am seeing here that is, it may be shock to a lot of people. It kind of is to me too, but going into next year, 2024 recruiting rankings, of course, Georgia's number one, but right behind them is the Florida Gators. Now, a lot of people may not know that, but the Florida Gators are recruiting very well right now too. And I know we normally talk about this on our Wednesday shows, but do you think, David, that Napier is becoming this pretty elite recruiter, even though it's still early on? And do you think that he has the capabilities as a coach to really turn this program around?
Oh, no, I don't think you can question at all that Napier is an elite recruiter, because keep in mind that the biggest reason, not the only reason, but the biggest reason why we brought Napier to Gainesville in the first place was because of his recruiting. And, you know, when he was at Louisiana, Louisiana had the best recruiting class in, you know, in the Sun Belt for the 3 or 4 years that he was there. Now, people will be quick to point out that, like, oh, he only recruited 3 stars. Like, well, yeah, like, no, duh. It's Louisiana. You really think he's going to get big time recruits there? Recruiting at Florida under him did get off to a bit of a slow start. That's a whole complicated matter that we don't really need to get into. But eventually it did take off. And listen, let's also not forget to give credit to our collective. They've been doing a great job with NIL and, you know, stuff like that. So that definitely does make things easier for Napier, and I don't think he'll deny that. But yeah, absolutely. I don't think it's a question that Napier that Napier is an elite recruiter. And I also want to say that to all of our fans who want Napier gone, I promise you that if he's gone this year, then you can kiss half the 2024 class goodbye. I mean, you don't think getting rid of him right now is going to have consequences? Well, listen, like I said before, I don't like everything about Napier. Okay, he's not perfect, but again, you got to look at the big picture here. And you get rid of him now, then you can kiss a bunch of our commits goodbye. So
You're hearing a very similar argument being made right now too. If you know any Auburn fans, they're going to talk about Hugh Freeze, and it's not really fair. It's not fair even for Napier too, because it's still early on. And I have faith in Hugh Freeze. I have faith in Billy Napier, especially when it comes to recruiting. That I think you just got to give him that time. But the SEC is always going to be the SEC. And I say that because you've got two big dogs coming in next year with Texas and Oklahoma, who have their fair share of recruits. But you're going to have a Billy Napier coming in with the number 2 class. You will have Georgia, the number 1 class. You're going to have a full year of Hugh Freeze and recruiting coming in. I just think that the SEC, just when you feel like maybe they're going to slow down a little bit, they continue to turn it up even more, and they're always going to be the big dogs. No wonder Texas and Oklahoma wanted to go there. Everyone wants to be there, but I'm really excited for next year to see what the SEC is going to bring. Especially, I mean, you got Brian Kelly at LSU. Granted, he has probably the worst defense right now, but they're still pretty elite. He is going to lose Jaden Daniels, but Brian Kelly, a lot of people like to play for Brian Kelly. He is a very elite coach, and he's going to be getting a lot of recruits. So it's almost going to be one big pool, and you're going to have all SEC schools just kind of picking them out when it comes to recruits. But I'm excited to see. But I mean, Ed, what's the report on Quinn Ewers? When can college football fans, expect him to be back?
Hey,
Well,
a real quick,
Sarkisian,
Eddie. Sorry, just real quick. I just want to make a small correction. We have the number 3 class. Ohio State's number 2. If you're looking at 24/7 Sports, we are number 2 in SEC recruiting. But either way, top 3 is still great. So just wanted to let you know that.
Perfect. No, I knew it was either 2 or 3, so I probably should have said that as well. But
No,
they're
it's
right.
all, it's
They're right
all,
behind them. They're pretty close.
yeah. All right, go ahead, Ed.
well, Steve Sarkisian is listed Quinn Ewers as week to week with that sore shoulder. Now, the initial reports were saying that he was going to be out 3 to 5 weeks. And when Sarkisian stated that Quinn Ewers is going to be week to week, that was a bit of a surprise to the Texas fan base. But if you saw him on Saturday, he had his jersey, but he was not in pads. There was no way he was going to be able to come back from that shoulder injury over 1 week. So we are looking at a couple more weeks, maybe 2, 3. If we get to 5, we're looking at the last game of the season for Quinn Ewers to come back. But even if it takes that long, that is going to give Malik Murphy time to grow, as well as confidence in the team around Malik Murphy, and have that ability to interchange if Quinn doesn't come back 100% the way that we expect him to.
Yeah, with how technology is and medical nowadays, we're seeing people heal up a lot faster than what we're used to. I mean, for goodness sake, people, if you've watched the NFL at all this year, you're seeing Aaron Rodgers. Granted, he's not playing, but this guy tore his Achilles, and he's out there throwing the football before the game, almost like it's nothing. I mean, it's crazy to me. And then there was another injury that happened that I'm just like, I don't know how these guys are just healing like that, especially on some of these big injuries. It's just it's shocking to me. So yeah, the week to week maybe it doesn't really surprise me. I mean, who knows? He could be back. It's just everyone's got different bones, so it just depends on, I mean, bones, muscles, how he's healing. I mean, he could be back sooner, he could be back later. I mean, is there a game that worries you at all the rest of this year besides going to a conference championship on your schedules, or anything that's kind of worries you as maybe a trap game or something?
The game that I have had circled this entire season as a worry is this game coming up. Kansas State is coming to DKR, and I am scared to death because that is a team that has not given up a touchdown in 9 quarters of football. That's 2 games ago since Texas Tech. They only gave up a field goal to TCU and completely blanked Houston. And they smushed those teams into submission, and for the level of play that they're playing at, they have actually elevated this game to be the big noon kickoff for Fox Sports, which means we're going to get the big pomp and circumstance on the 40 acres of the pregame show, the number 1 telecast for that time slot. And that, to your point, David, is part of the recruiting that you get. You get those prime time slots. That's what people want to go to. So they get their faces seen. They get their numbers seen. They get their plays seen more so than at a lesser school, and that is part of the recruiting that Steve Sarkisian is going to bring to the SEC, as well as recruiting against Florida.
Yeah, that's going to be a big game. I feel like this weekend, Kansas State. I mean, they did it last year too. They're here to kind of spoil things, but they do have a good team at the same time. So I could see why you had that circled all year. I don't anticipate it being easy, especially if you are playing with Malik Murphy, who has not been the starter all year. So you had your one game. You're going to have 2 weeks at first team reps, but it's all about how well can you do with what you have, because you have a lot at hand. You do with this receiving core that you guys have. It's all about the connection. And I like I said, I liked what I saw this last week against BYU, because BYU can be a tough game, especially for your first start. But now you're playing Kansas State, so I'll be looking out for that game. I'll also be looking at several other games, including LSU and Alabama. We all know how that game could play out. It doesn't have much implications for us. Sorry, David. I know SEC and all, but I mean it is SEC West. I mean that's essentially the battle right there. Although Ole Miss could have something to say come later, because if I remember correctly, they still only have one loss. So Ole Miss is still kind of sneaking right under the radar, under a lot of people's noses. So, but yeah, I mean, you got anything else more to say, David, about Florida Gators this last week? Graham Mertz. I mean, were you impressed at all with his level of play against Georgia?
I thought Mertz was decent against. I mean, ultimately his numbers, his box score numbers will say that he was good, but like I wasn't overly impressed with Mertz too much, but I also wasn't too upset with his play. Like, the best way that I can describe it is he played as good as you can play against a team like Georgia, and that's the best thing that I can say about him at the end of the day.
Yeah, there's one. If I have one negative thing to say about my Ducks, especially after this last weekend, is it's almost like they took their foot off the gas pedal. I don't think they did it on purpose, but there's something about it that after halftime with this team, I don't know if the mentality changes or what, but earlier in the year, we played Colorado. We were whooping their butts. We ended up, pretty much whooping their butts the whole game. But going into halftime, Dan Lanning, they asked him, what can we expect? And he said, pretty much more of this. But it didn't quite happen. And it's one thing to say something, but it's another to actually do. And I do love his aggressive play style. And I know it didn't really pay off much against Washington. I know it will eventually, but with this game against Utah, I don't know. I feel like the second half, and we had our starters in, we just couldn't score anymore. So it was kind of worrisome. I'm sure the players, they didn't want to get hurt. I can't blame them there. But at the same time, you had your starters still out there, but you couldn't really do anything more than that. Luckily, our defense held their offensive scoring, because who knows, it could have been a different game if their offense was able to rally. So that's my one negative. I'll always have, pros and cons. Our team's not going to be perfect whatsoever. And I mean, at the end of the day, I'm just a fan. I mean, I'm not the AD or anything like that, but I would like to see them continue to have their foot on the gas, especially if they're going to say that. It seems like that's been their motto all year, but I would like to see more of it, because if for some reason we're known as a team that can't really come out in the second half, I mean, all it takes is one team to exploit that. Hence what happened last year with Oregon State. So you had your game circled, Texas Ed. That's my game I had circled this year, and that's the Civil War against Oregon State, especially what they did against us last year. So I would really like to see Dan Lanning and them to continue to shove, the ball down our opponent's throat. We play Cal this week. Bearing they got no protesters on the middle of the field. I expect us to dominate that game. So, yeah. But You got anything else to say, fellas, before we end this show?
I do have just one. Go ahead, Ed. Yeah, I've been talking
Okay.
too much. Go ahead.
One thing I'd like to see in this upcoming week is, yes, Matt and I, we have aggressive play callers as our head coaches. In fact, it's being known as a landing now to go and be recklessly aggressive and go for it on 4th down and 2 from your own 37-yard line. Something crazy like that. I would like to see more coaches actually take a look and go, hey, if we get 3 points out of this, let's take the 3 points and move on with our lives and not risk anything, just flipping this ball game completely around. Let's do that. Let's take the points, move on, and just as for effect, in the BYU Texas game, we could have had 6 more points, and halfway through the third quarter, which we could have just smushed them even more from there, as opposed to letting them feel like they were still in it because they had stopped 2 fourth and whatever from the goal line.
Hey, Ed. I think Skip Bayless just had a heart attack listening to what you have to say, because we all know that Skip Bayless has a clear bias against kickers.
His opinion doesn't matter much anymore. So, but
Right.
as just a quick example, in the NFL, you look at the Chargers and their head coach, Brandon Staley, young guy, but that's what he's known for. And it's not really good. You look at what he's done, he's not really producing much. And they are a team that loses out on points because they go for it very often on 4th down. And for a lot of times, it does not pay off. So, in that Oregon against Washington game, there were several times you should have just took those points, because at the end of the day, we did lose by 3. We missed a game tying field goal at the end, but we had, I want to say, 2 chances to at least put up easy field goals, chip shots, which would have given us 6 points. Hence, we would have won that game. But you can't live and dwell on that, but you do have to learn from your mistakes. So, David, there was a point you wanted to put on.
Yeah, we only have about a minute left, so I won't address that. But I will just add to what you said about Brandon Staley, man. Like, the Chargers are just they are such an interesting team, man, because I feel like every year we always hear about how talented they are, and they are talented. In fact, you could argue that like they're top 5 as far as talent goes, but nothing ever works for them, either because of key injuries or because of completely inept coaching. Like, they are truly a cursed franchise.
Unfortunately, they are, and they are with my Oregon Duck quarterback, Justin Herbert, there. I think after this year, they'll get Staley out and things can change. But that's about all we have today, folks. I'm going to go ahead and leave it really quick with my other host, David Street. Please let the fans know where they can find you.
At David_Street 17. Again, that's at David_Street 17.
Texas Ed.
At Ed Smith 7133. Hook 'em.
And I am at Booster Matty Ice. I am your host, Matty Ice, and we are Coast to Coast Sports. Thank you, guys. Till next time, go Ducks.